Welcome to the Tzurba Hilchot Shabbat Program with Rabbi Shalom Rosner. Tzurba is a revolutionary halacha sefer which guides you through over 300 topics in Jewish law in a unique signature style. In this weekly series specifically, Rabbi Shalom Rosner learns through the Tzurba Hilchot Shabbat volumes, helping us all master the Halachot of Shabbat in just 2 years. Tzurba volumes are available for purchase worldwide on Amazon. And to learn more about Tzurba, or for those in Eretz Yisrael looking to purchase volumes, please head over to tzurbaolami.com. For more information, see the description below. And now, Rabbi Shalom Rosner.
Okay, let's begin our next discussion of dealing with animals on Shabbos, the final Shiur of dealing with animals on Shabbos, before we get to the world of Muksa, which starts next year. So this was the second part of Shiur number 4 in volume number 20 of the Tzurba Hilchot Shiurim. As we know, the Lax family volumes, and this is the Niyaza family volume, and we are in Shiur number 4. The Shiur was sponsored, dedicated in the merit of Refuah Shalema for Anat Chana Bas Fula, and in honor of all the incredible Torah that Tzurba provides to help people learn and transform their lives. So we are dealing with animals on Shabbos, and we dealt with trapping animals, we dealt with killing animals, and now, starting on page 185, we're going to deal with a very Lamaisa question, and that is moving animals and touching animals, the issues of muksa, and how to deal with feeding animals, a separate issue d'Rabbanan, as we'll see. So we start with page 185, the issue of moving animals. So it seems pretty clear from the Gemara and from the poskim that animals are muksa on Shabbos. Animals are not designated, and they are inherently muksa, and that's what the Gemara says in Shabbos Tet Mem Gimel. The Gemara there talks about the principle of mevatel kli mehechano, which we'll have to get to, Be'ez Hashem, in muksa issues. One is not allowed to make something that is muchan, which is prepared, to make it muksa, to make it not usable on Shabbos. Rashi discusses and Tosfos discusses what the svara for that is. Is it an issue of soser, you're halachically destroying the kli? Is it bona, you're like cementing the kli into the ground, bona? But either way. But the Gemara says there is no problem though with kofanas asal lefnei avrochim, source number 24. We're starting on 185. Kofanas asal lefnei avrochim, one is allowed to turn over a basket so that chicks will go up and down the basket on Shabbos. Sheyalav sheyerdu. V'ksavar mutal taltolo. So, and there's no problem with that. So the Gemara says, Vatanya aslo taltalo. But there's a Raisa that says that once you do that, your little basket that you're turned over is muksa. So, is it muksa or is it not muksa? The Gemara says, ba'odan alav. While the chick is on top, so then the bowl is kind of what's called a basis l'davar ha'aser. It is a support for a davar muksa, so it's muksa. But once the chick went off, then it is not muksa. But what's clear from that the chick itself is muksa. The only shaila is whether the basket underneath is muksa or not. But the chick clearly is muksa. And that's what the Maggid Mishnah says, and others. The Maggid Mishnah says, and the Rambam, chafei, upirusha afrochim, v'shum behema chayv of, chayim, einam mutarim b'toltol, lefi she'einam re'uyim. Muksa, animals are muksa, right? They have no inherent purpose, and therefore the Shulchan Aruch says, source 26, Orach Chaim Shinches, Aser l'taltal muk behema chayv of. Right, Shinches is all about muksa. Shin Yudches is bishul, Shin Yudtes is borer, Shinches. Those are three of the most common and important simanim to learn lamaisa: Shinches, Shin Yudches, and Shintes. So Shulchan Aruch says, Aser l'taltal behema chayv of. Animals are muksa, and therefore the Mishnah Berurah points out that because animals are muksa, even where trapping an animal is allowed, as we discussed, where it's going to cause a great pain, but picking it up with one's hands is not allowed. Says the Mishnah Berurah there on that Shulchan Aruch, source 27. Even if a loss can be caused, a bird is flooding around the kalim, and he could break it with his wings, with his fluttering. Still, it's also to grab it. Even if there's no trapping issue, animals are muksa. Shooing them away, and even if my hand touches them when I'm shooing them, that I didn't mean to touch the animal, and that's in a moving muksa in an unusual way, as we'll get to the details of muksa. So this is the yesod of the Gemara. The question is, the Gemara is talking about, animals like chickens and cows and other types of animals that are farm animals. But what about pets? Right? It doesn't seem to be so common that in the days of the Talmud, there were animals that people kept as for fun and enjoyment. So do we say that pets are different because that is inherently a toy, inherently non-muksa because I've designated it beforehand? So what do we say? So the Gemara in Shabbos Daf Mem Hey and elsewhere in source 28 discusses Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon Yehuda off in the Gemara beginning of Beitza. Rabbi Yehuda holds a muksa. Rabbi Shimon doesn't hold a muksa. That is not exactly right. The Gemara says that sometimes, but what that means to say is Rabbi Yehuda has a more expansive shita of muksa, and Rabbi Shimon has a less expansive shita of muksa. But everybody holds to the concept of muksa, of some muksas, but there are major machlokas tanoims and machlokas rishonim what muksas we hold of. So the Gemara says in Shabbos Daf Mem Hey that Rabbi Yochanan said the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon. The halacha is like Rabbi Shimon, that there are less muksas that we hold of. Says the Gemara, Yimam Rabbi Yochanan Hachi, did Rabbi Yochanan really say this? That there are less muksas? V'haboy mineahu saba keruya, v'yamrile seruya. There was an elderly man that asked for Rabbi Yochanan, Kida shaltarna goles, ma'oletutule b'Shabbos. If you have a nest of a chicken, the nest, are you allowed to move that? Is that muksa? The nest? Amar le, klum asui elo latarna golim. So the answer given, Rabbi Yochanan says, well, isn't that made for chickens? And if it's made for chickens, then it's not made for you. And therefore it's muksa. And there you see Rabbi Yochanan is quoting that. But one second, if Rabbi Yochanan holds like Rabbi Shimon, that he doesn't hold of too many muksas, so why here would he say it is muksa? Ask the Gemara, doesn't that show that Rabbi Yochanan holds like Rabbi Yehuda? Answers the Gemara, no. Maybe there it's a muksa that even Rabbi Shimon would hold like. There's a dead chick. And there's a dead chick in the basket, so the basket is a basas adavar asa. The dead chick is muksa; it has no purpose, and therefore it is muksa even according to Rabbi Shimon. Wait a minute, a dead chick? Eso says, why don't you say a live chick? Right? Didn't we just say earlier, right, based on source number 24, that kofan asasal of chicks and all animals are muksa? So why does the Gemara have to say, oh, the basket is muksa, the nest is muksa because there's a dead chick in there? Even if it's a live chick, wouldn't that be muksa? Wouldn't that be a basis? Says Tosfos, no. Tosfos has a deya there, Shabbos Mem Hey, Pirish Harav Rabbeinu Yosef. Telo nakat efro achai, mishum dachai chazi l'shatik botinok, kishaboche. A little chick could be used as a toy to entertain a child, a baby, when the baby is crying. So therefore, Rav Yosef said that's why it doesn't say live chick, because a live chick is not muksa. Says Tosfos ve'enira. I don't think that's the pshat. Or, right, you have to, maybe this Gemara is Deloki Hilchasa. Why? Because Tosfos quotes the other Gemara from 2 daf ago. That can't be the pshat here of why it says dead chick instead of live chick, because even live chicks are going to be usser. Even a live chick is going to be usser. So Tosfos holds, based on the Gemara earlier that we had on Daf Mem Gimel in source 24, that even a live chick, even if it has a use, right? He's not arguing that you're not going to use this chick to entertain a child. Even if it has a use, it's going to be muksa. That's what Tosfos holds. He quotes this deya of Rav Rabbeinu Yosef, but Tosfos does not accept that deya. And the Rush also does not accept that. The Maharach Or Zarua, that's the son of the Or Zarua. Rabbi Yitzchak Or Zarua wrote the Or Zarua, one of the great Ashkenazic Baalei Tosfos, and then his son, Reb Chaim Or Zarua, wrote a separate Sefer of Chuvas, and it's called Maharach Or Zarua, to separate it from the Or Zarua. So he asked the question to the Rush, right? They were contemporaries. The Maharach Or Zarua asks, what do you say about pets, animals that people have? Vod hodieni, kinirali, source 30. Afa pisha ba'alechai muksim ninu, even though animals are muksa, that's only talking about farm animals that are not there for entertainment purposes. Mikal makom nirali, lahatir tiltaltel ofos mitzafsim b'kol na'ak b'kluvo. What about parrots? What about birds who have a nice sound? I would think that there shouldn't be muksa, because people get benefit from them. And then he says, he asked that question to the Rush. So the Marach Or Zarua asked that to the Rush, and the Rush answers, sorry, though it seems to make some sense, but I can't matir. Find kalim. Once they have a usage, we're going to say that is for sure not muksa. But animals are different. It could be chazal aser animals low plug. V'yesh leser yoser b'balei deimishtam b'balei chayim v'lo plug rabbanim b'balei chayim low plug. So Tosfos and the Rush come to the maskana that animals are muksa. You can't move animals. Again, touching muksa we mentioned and we will mention is not an issue, but touching. If you touch something, if I touch a car with my finger, it's not going to move it. But if I touch any animal, l'chora, that's going to move it, and moving animals are muksa. So Tosfos and the Rush quote that it's muksa. Chazal did not differentiate. But is there what to rely on? Is there anybody? So there is a Rav Moshe. There's a Rav Moshe in Chelek Ches, Chelek Hey of the Igros Moshe, which was printed. It's in volume 8. It was printed posthumously, but it's Orach Chaim Chelek Hey. And 31 Sheila, and you'll see what was added in here. Sheila Tziporim Ktanim, little birds. Shemetzafzafim, that like a parrot. Viktanim and Mesakrimon, and the kids play with it. Heim Dino Kamuksa. Is that muksa? Because Tosfos Shabbos Memhei Hitir Rav Rabbeinu Yosef Lataltel Efrachai. Rav Yosef Matud. Even the Tosfos said no. Tshuva says Rav Moshe Kol Balei Chaim Havali Muksa Afilu Ba'osan Shatinokos Mesachken Mohen. All animals are muksa, even if children are playing with them. Ela im Kainei Miyuchadim L'Shashuim, unless it is miyuchad to be a toy. In parentheses, pets. And if you look on the footnote here, because if you look in the earlier tshuva, which was printed by Rabbi Bodner in one of the early Muksa books, he quotes it without the last line about pets. And if you don't have the last line, it sounds like Rav Moshe says, like lo plug. All by the Chayim Muksa, even ba'osan shetinokas b'sakin behen, even those that kids play with. Sounds like it's totally Muksa and Rabbi Bodner there, and many other Muksa Sfarim say that it's Aser. But Rabbi Shapsei Rappaport, who put together the posthumous volume, said that Rav Moshe told him to add in that line. Maybe he changed his mind, but he told him to add in that line to the tshuva that unless it's pets. And it's the same thing with Rabbi Shalom Zalman, interestingly. Rabbi Shalom Zalman in the Shmir Shabbos is quoted as not being so convinced that pets should be mutter, but in the Shulchan Shlomo, a later compilation in 32, Tziporim v'chadome, oklavim, dogs, sha'anashim, elash mevalim zmanam lahevel larik. He's not into people having dogs in general, but if they have a dog, regil masachi bahem, people play with them. So, says the Shulchan Shlomo of Shlomo Zalman, Kivish atashmisham hu l'taltel mimakom lamakom shaper dami ve'ein zeh muksa. So a number of poskim say that maybe pets are different. Chazal never had this in mind. We don't say a low plug. The Yalkid Yosef in 33 is not convinced. He thinks it still should be usser, as well as the Archa Shabbos. Probably most poskim that you would find would say it's still usser. The Archa Shabbos, Balei Chaim, Haim, source 34, Haim bechlal muksa. Balei Chaim, animals are included in muksa, ke'etzim va'avanim, like wood and stone, kivan she'enim muchanim, even since they're not muchan. Ve'enim ruim l'shimusha shel adam, ve'en l'taltalam klal. Right, they're not royal l'taltel. V'yafilu Balei Chaim she'b'nei megadim abeisam. But batayim, even animals that people have in their houses. V'regilin b'yamos acholi kachosam b'yadayim. You play with them. You pet them. Harei muksim l'taltalam b'Shabbos. Wow. And that's how most poskim assume, that there's a low plug. Is there what to rely on? Yes, there's what to rely on. Rav Moshe Feinstein, Rav Shlomo Zalman seem to matter it at least later in their lives, but there is what to rely on. One shouldn't. So again, this is the what the poskim say. What about petting? Is petting touching? Is petting moving? Right, picking up an animal, picking up a dog. That's this machlokas poskim. But what about, according to the shittas that are machmir, that you shouldn't, they're muksa, and you can't move them? What about just petting them? So again, according to the ones that say animals are not muksa, then of course petting them is fine. But what about the poskim that say that animals are muksa, all, even pets? So that's not clear. Again, is that called moving the animal? When you move some of his fur, right? Some of his the covering that he has. So if you look in the Shulchan Aruch, seems to say that one can't move limbs. One can't move limbs of animals, maybe just to push them a little bit to walk. That would be okay. Kol be'ema chayav of in 35. Medadin osam b'chatzer. Medadi, that means like encourage them to walk in the chatzer. She'ochez b'tzavaram u'b'tzdadim u'molichanim suichem b'alichayim l'kach. To move them along. U'bavad shelo yagbihem. Not just, you can't lift them up. Be'inyan sheyakru ragleim in ha'aretz. The muksanen, if you lift it up, that's carrying muksa. But petting, no, not 100% clear. Rabbi Bodner and other poskim say if animals are muksa, you can't pet them as well. And l'chora, that should be the case. Because, right, when you touch them, you're moving some of their hair. But the Shulchan Aruch says in another context that one is allowed to clean one's wet hands or dirty hands on a tail of a horse. That's the last source in this section. The last Makar in this section, 36. Mishanaslachacha yodo betit. If somebody's hands are dirty, mekancha bezanav asus, you could wipe them with a horse's tail, ubezanav apara, or a cow's tail, ubemapa akasha asuya lechos bakotzim. You could wipe it. So what do you mean? You're moving the horse's tail. So is that because it's a tzorich? Is it tzorich? It's unclear. If you look in the Mefarshim, they talk about, if you say things are muksa, well, animals are muksa, then how would you be able to do this? So this is the issue of moving animals. So it's a machlokas poskim about pets. Seems like many are machmir, so maybe l'chadchila one should be machmir about this. But again, if there's a real tzarach gadol, then one would be. Seems like there is room by some poskim to be mekel. What about related feeding animals? What about feeding animals on Shabbos? So there is a gzeira d'Rabbanan not to feed certain animals. Either because it's tircha yasera, the Mishnah Berurah seems to say that. Others say you can't feed animals that don't. Well, we'll get certain ones because you might come to trap them, right? Maybe it's a gzeira d'Rabbanan. But the Gemara has a distinction. Some animals yes, some animals no. The Gemara says here, Shabbos Kufnun Hey, source number 37 on page 191. The Gemara says, Nosdin mizonos lefnei kelev. One is allowed to put food in front of a dog. Ve'nosdin mizonos lefnei chazer, but not in front of a pig. What's the difference? Animal's an animal. If an animal relies on you for food, then it's mutter to give him food. That's the yesod. If an animal could get food without you, it's a stray, and it can get food without you, so then one is not allowed. Again, either because of Tircha Yasera or Shema Yatzud. Again, the Tircha Yasera reason seems to be the one that's central according to this chiluk. That's why there's a difference between rely on you or not. Amar Rav Ashi, Masisa Nami Deker. Rav Ashi says the Mishnah also proves it. Because the Mishnah says, you can't put water in front of bees or birds in your shovach. In front of chickens, yes. What's the difference? It must be because of the yonim and the dvorim, they could go anywhere else to get food. But the other chickens can't. So isn't there a raya from the Mishnah, Rav Ashi asks? Says the Gemara, maybe not a raya. Why did they talk about water? You should talk about wheat and barley, right? So Ella shiny mai the shlichi ba'agma. Don't bring me a raya from the Mishnah. Water is different, right? You can't give water because that's common and they can get water themselves. But other things, maybe that they can't get themselves, maybe you're allowed to feed that even to animals that don't rely on you for food. The question is how to understand this Gemara. The Gemara seems to have two stages. One stage is the distinction between relying on you for food, mutter, not relying on you for food, asr. We tried to bring a raya from a Mishnah, and we knocked out the Mishnah with a different distinction. Distinction in food that's readily available to the animal, asr to give them. Food that's not readily available to the animals, mutter to give them, even if they don't rely on you for food. So the question is that just knocking out the raya from the Mishnah, or is that lahalacha? Is that lahalacha? That is not 100% clear. The Rambam seems to say, the Rambam and the Rif don't quote the second distinction. Only the first, meaning they assume that that's just a knockout of the raya. That's not a halacha. Because if you look in the Rambam in Hilchot Shabbos, Perachaf Aleph, the Rambam says in 38, when do we say that it's mutter to feed an animal on Shabbos? B'mishim mizanos alav. If they rely on you for food. Kigon behemto v'chaiso. Animals, behemoths and chayis v'yonei abayis v'avazim v'tarnagolim, chickens and geese. Avol mi she'en mizanos alav. But animals, that could just do fine without you. Kigon chazer v'yonei shovach. Birds that are in a chicken coop dvorim. Lo yitin lefneim lo mazom lo mayim. You can't feed them. Can't feed them if they don't rely on you for food. So the Rambam does not quote the second line, the second distinction in the Gemara about, if it's something unusual that they can't get, you can give any animal. And the Ran wonders about it. The Ran notes that the Rambam and the Rif don't quote this distinction, and the Ran says in 39, he quotes the Gemara, and then he says, Lafichach tamahani ala Rambam zal, shekasa berachaf aleph, al mi she'im mizanos alav, v'chulu, v'lo chilek bein shchiach bein lo shchiach. He's not machalik between whether it's available or not. So he just says, I don't know why. He's not going to say they're wrong, because obviously the Gdolei HaPoskim, the Rif and the Rambam, but he says, I'm not sure why. So the answer is the Beis Yosef says, it must be that they read the Gemara just as we suggested, that it's just a knockout of the Raya, but it's not that we paskin that way. Not that we paskin that way. And that's what the Beis Yosef and the Shulchan Aruch paskins. The Beis Yosef says, Rabbi Yosef Karu, miu linyan halacha, naktinan kistam brisa. We passing like the Stam Brisa Diktani. What did the Brisa say at the beginning of the Gemara? Any food, and this is the distinction. Right? We don't no food can be given to an animal that does not rely on you for food, and that's what the Shulchan Aruch paskins. In 41, no food to animals that don't rely on you for food. The Chazon Ish, though, says lamaisa. Again, what's the issue here? Animals that don't rely on you for food, giving them something that there's not available to them. Is that allowed? So, it seems to be a machlokas Rishonim. The Chazon Ish says that, we're talking about an Issa D'Rabbanan here. Talking about Nisa D'Rabbanan, it's not 100% clear why the Rif and the Rambam didn't quote it. Maybe they would agree b'di'ev that it's okay. So he says if you rely on this, if you do it, ein lo hifsid, hasomech al divrei haran lo hifsid, says the Chazon Ish. So you have a day. The Shulchan Giborim notes in the other direction. Shulchan Giborim, again, one of the Gedolei Harishonim on the Dafi HaRif, on the side of the Rif, he says even if an animal is owned by you, if they don't rely on you for food, you can't feed them. Only if they rely on you for food, right? The Gemara is, when the Gemara talks about the Yoni Shovach, these doves, doesn't say that Yoni Shovach of others or yours. That just says, V'tzorachin, lama ze Yoni Shovach v'aliyah, shem shalom mikri im zonosa alecha. Why can't you feed them? The answer is because they can get food from elsewhere. And if the issue is tircha yisera, then you can't. V'ikol meimar debisham hachi mikri im zonosa alecha, l'visha motzim lecha makom acher. They can find elsewhere. Good. One other important ha'ara, the Eishel Avram from Buchach. There's two. The Eishel Avram there's a Pri Megadim wrote a commentary in the Maggid Avram called Eishel Avram. That's the Eishel Avram. But when they call the other Eishel Avram in the back of the Shulchan Aruch, he's known as the Eishel Avram of Buchach. Right? He is Rabbi Avram David Warman of Buchach, 1770 to 1840, as it says here. That's a different Eishel Avram. So he says. Again, a couple of important points about this. What if somebody has just leftover food and they're just throwing it out? Right? Is that called feeding animals? I'm just getting rid of my food. I'm putting it in the garbage. I'm putting it in a place, even if I know the animals are going to get it, but I'm not putting it there for the animals, that would be okay. And we'll see, this could have an important nafkamina. Mikol makom, kishem mashlich machol miyado. If you're kavanah, the whole thing is just a d'Rabbanan here. And it's a d'Rabbanan of feeding animals that don't rely on you for food because of tircha yisera. But what if my kavanah is not to feed the animals? My kavanah is just to do something for me. Like just to get rid of this food that's leftovers, mutter. I'm throwing the food out. I have to schlep and go somewhere dafka where there aren't animals? One can. Right, and therefore the Eishel Avram says you can throw it out if it's just leftovers. And what about shaking out a tablecloth of crumbs? I have to dafka do it on a day when I don't see any birds. I'm shaking it out because I want to shake it out the tablecloth. Even though animals and birds might come take it, that is mutter. Again, this is D'Rabbanan requires kavana. And we'll get to another example a little bit later. In a couple of minutes. But says the Yalkut Yosef, mutter lenaris hamapa birmir peses, o bechatzar abayis. One is allowed to shake out a tablecloth on a porch or in a yard. Even if the birds are going to come and gobble up the crumbs. Even if sometimes you shake it out somewhere else, if you're just acting for yourself, then one is allowed to do it. The Mishnah Berurah also in the Bir Halacha quotes, if an animal relies on people for food, then you could feed it, even if it's not you. Right? It shouldn't be that, only my animals, but your animals I can't. There is an Elio Rabbah like that. That's what the Bir Halacha quotes in 46. The Elio Rabbah says, only your animals, because they rely on you. No, that just means they rely on people. Lanias daiti ein zebar. The kivan shehem shel Yisrael. The einam ochlin mehefker. Since they're owned by a Jew, they're not hefker. They need, people to provide. So other people, that the owner or the non-owner, both can do it. They rely on humans for sustenance, and that is all that is there. So that's the chiluk. There is, just to end this section, there is a special heter, it seems, for dogs. For dogs. The Gemara has what to say about dogs. The Gemara seems to say that a dog we have to have extra rachmanis on. You would think that it's because of Lo'echas Kal Lashona by Yitzias Mitzrayim, but the Gemara towards the end of Masechah Shabbos, Kuf Nun Hey, source 47, Darash Rabbi Yona Pischa de Bein Nasiya. Rabbi Yona darshaned at the doorway of the Nasi. My Dechsiv. What does the pasuk mean in Mishlei? Yod the tzaddik din dalin, that the tzaddik knows of the din of the poor. Yodei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem is the tzaddik, and He knows the din of the dal of the dog. Bekelav shemizonosa muatin. A dog, his sustenance is scarce. Lefichach shoah b'achilaso me'av shloshi yamim. And that's why Hashem keeps the food in the intestines. It doesn't digest so much, so it sits in there, and therefore He has rachmanis because he's not going to get so much food. So the digestion takes a long time. And Rav Huna says, you know what you learn from this statement? That it's good to give food to the dog. Arach ara l'mishtei umso l'kalba. Right? Throw the meat to the dog. Throw the meat to the dog because, that's, as long as the Gemara continues, as long as you do it in a way that he's not going to be nimshach basrach, right? You don't want him to always follow you home and be near you. Okay, but either way you see, giving food to the dog has a special din. And that's what the Magen Avram quotes. And the Mishnah Berurah quotes that one could feed even an ownerless dog, even a stray dog, because dogs you have to have rachmanis on because it's hard for them to find food. Okay, because maybe it depends on the setting, but here it seems dogs are dogs. I feel kelav shina magala bebeso, says the Mishnah Berurah, quoting from the Magen Avram 48. Mutter to mitzvah ksas gamkein litin lamazonas. It's a little mitzvah. K'moshamar Chazal, like Chazal say, Chas HaKadosh Baruch Hu Allah l'fishem mizonosav muatin u'mash bechilasav me'av. So he quotes this Gemara in Shabbos Kufnan Hey. We have rachmanis on the dog. It doesn't have so much sustenance, and therefore one can give. And the Shmir Shabbos summarizes all of these laws in 49. Kol Baal Chayim Sheina Motze Lo Mazon. Any animal that does not have food. Okay, our shiur is not about Tzurba Hilchot saving animals, doing malachas for animals, right? Even a drabanan, that's not today's shiur. But the Shmir Shabbos says any animal that does not find food, v'hu raven is hungry, muter litin lefanav mazon gam b'Shabbos gam b'yantif. If the animal doesn't have food, even if he's not usually relying on you, but now he's relying on somebody he needs, you're allowed to feed it. Ki ari kasav racham avakol masav. Racham avakol masav. That's one of the sources. Rav Asher Weiss likes to point out that there are many, many sources in the Rishonim for Tzurba Hilchot, none in the Gemara. None in the Gemara. He uses this as one of his examples of Ratzon HaTorah, Ratzon Hashem. But one of the sources is Racham Avakol Masav. V'chein motor l'seis mazal v'kelev. Gam im ein mizonoso ala adam. Right? The dog. You're allowed to give any dog food. Again, not petting the dog or playing with the dog. That was the machlokas haposkim earlier. But you're allowed to give the dog. You can even put it into the mouths of the animals if they have trouble eating it themselves. Again, we didn't talk about that, but that's what the Shmir Shabbos continues as well. That's called ha'achala. And what about feeding fish? Solach ora, if they rely on you, they're not getting food anywhere else. So one is allowed to feed their fish on Shabbos. If you feed them every day, so you feed them on Shabbos. Says the Shmir Shabbos in source 50. Aquarium. Sheish bo dagim v'tzimchei mayim. Asur lachlos v'yim b'Shabbos. You can't switch the water on Shabbos, but you could add water on Shabbos. Why are you allowed to add water on Shabbos? Because maybe if you don't add the water on Shabbos, fresh water, they're going to die. So this is basically like feeding them. Shemizon noseim al ha'adam. They rely on you for food. V'ubelito sefes mayim heim alun lamos. If you don't add the water, they're going to die. This is like feeding them. But what about moving the aquarium? It wants to be machmir, because fish are muksa. You got to feed them, but the fish are muksa. Dog, what happens if a fish jumped out of the water on Shabbos? Shabbos. Can you put it back in? So machlokas, as you see, whether muksa would be pushed aside for this circumstance. If one of the fish die, mutar lasiro, because leaving it probably would cause the other fish to die, and that would be a hefzer gadol, right? If all the fish die, if one fish is going to die, out of the aquarium, so maybe it will be different. Finally, the minhag of Shabbos Shira. The minhag. There are those, the Magen Avram already quotes 400 years ago, that there is a minhag to give food, to give chitim, wheat. Put it out for the birds. Put it out for the birds on Shabbos Shira. So some poskim say, you really want to be yosei the minhag and not get to any questions? Put out the food on Erev Shabbos. Erev Shabbos. Birds don't rely on you for food, so why are you putting the food out, right? L'chara it's an issa d'Rabbanan of feeding animals on Shabbos. But the Magen Avraham quotes this: "V'yish noagin lasis chitim b'Shabbos shira lefnei ha'ofos ve'eno nachon." I think it's wrong. It's a violation of the issa d'Rabbanan. Shaharei ein mizonosan alecha. So, is there a way to defend the minhag? So the Aruch HaShulchan Kedarka Bakodesh comes in and says, wait, remember we said before, when you shake out the tablecloth, why is that allowed? Because your kavanah isn't to feed the animals. Your kavanah is just to, do something for yourself. So by Shabbos Shira, says the Aruch HaShulchan, we're not doing it for the birds. We're doing it for ourselves, to remember the Nisim, to remember the Simcha at Shabbos Shira. It also goes to Tosefes Shabbos. It's a mitzvah. It's a minhag mitzvah on us. It's a little difficult to say that because the mitzvah is to feed the animals. So it's a little tricky. But the Aruch HaShulchan says in 52, Yesh misra'amim, amasha minhag b'Shabbos Shira lizro chitim lefnei ofos, throwing the wheat, harei eim zon azam alecha. They don't rely on you. Avonira li de minhag Yisrael Torah. Aruch HaShulchan says, I'm going to defend it. Shere ein anu tarchim b'shvila mela b'shvilanu. We're not being torech for them. Torchi Yisera. It's for us. The bird sung Shira, so we're remembering that amazing miracle. Thanking them. Thank you for singing with us. The Shmir Shabbos and most poskim quote L'chumra. Shmir Shabbos lo yafe osim ela shemefazrim gargirei chitim. It shouldn't be done, but there are those that rely on this Aruch HaShulchan. Rav Ovadia in Chazon Ovadia says yesh noagim, and even though there are some that are oser, hanoagim kein yesh lo amishi yismochu minhag sheYisrael Torahu. The Tzitz Eliezer also says there are those that do it because they're remembering that birds helped us out because Dasan and Aviram put out the mun on Shabbos morning, and the birds ate it up. They wanted to trip up Moshe. In any case, if one has this minhag, there's flexibility and there are days, but it seems like better to do it on Erev Shabbos, and that would be Yotzei L'chala Deis, that you won't get into any issues. So again, having the animals. Hilchot Shabbos is just one topic regarding animals. There are many other topics regarding animals, in terms of neutering animals, in terms of food for Pesach for animals. Animals, a lot, bringing an animal into shul if it's needed. These are all important issues. But again, this finishes up the shiurim about animals. Again, the first year we had about animals relating to animals doing malacha. Just to review, malacha, mechamer, trapping animals. When is it usher? When is it mutter? What about setting a trap? That was all part one. And then we had part two, the second year, killing animals, killing dangerous animals, dealing with lice. That was the last year. And this year was moving animals, feeding fish, Shabbos Shira, and the like. Okay, Adkan Shir Dalid from this volume. As next time we pick up and start the world of Muksa.